The penultimate scenes of the Chamber of Secrets movie show us an extremely sped-up version of the book's final chapters. While the book spends time setting up Harry's final moment and confrontation with the heir of Slytherin, the movie skips over several key elements and details to get straight from point A to point B in only a few minutes. Things like Ginny almost revealing her secret to Harry and the truth behind the boys' visit to Hermione are just a couple examples of points in the plot that get skimmed over in the movie. But don't worry, in this video I'm going to reveal 13 changes that the movie made to the chapter in the book titled The Chamber of Secrets. So stick around until the end to find out everything you might have missed during Harry's second year at Hogwarts. My name is Gibby and welcome to episode 30 of Movies vs. Manuscripts Harry Potter Edition. This is the show where I analyze the Harry Potter movies side by side with the original books and find all the differences along the way. Before we go any further, I wanted to give a shout out to this commenter from a previous episode. Each week, I highlight one of the top comments from a past video, so be sure to share your thoughts down below when you're done watching. Also, I don't usually ask this at the beginning of the video, but if you're a regular viewer and you have yet to subscribe, I would really appreciate it if you click that button now to support the channel and help us out on our journey to 100,000 subscribers. Per usual, I'll cover all the changes across the 4 major categories of characters, timeline, location, and plot. But first, let's recap what happened during these scenes for this week's episode. Picking up from where we left off last week, with the boys nearly dying in the Forbidden Forest, we cut to a different day as Ron and Harry are visiting Hermione in the hospital wing. After sitting with her for a bit, Harry finds a crumpled up piece of paper in her hand, and the boys quickly realize that Hermione had made a massive discovery right before being petrified. They exit the hospital wing and we listen to them discuss this revelation as Harry reads what is on the paper. They learn that Slytherin's monster is a basilisk, that it's been using the pipes to get around the school, and they realize that Moaning Myrtle is the victim from 50 years ago. Soon after coming to these realizations though, they hear the loudspeaker announce that all students should return to their dormitories, and the boys run off, only to run into a group of professors who are all discussing the latest attack, which was on Ginny Weasley. The boys then see the message written on the wall, and they know what they have to do. Professor Lockhart had been sent away by the other professors, and the boys run to his office to hopefully find him and help him with his hunt. But once they arrive in his office, they find him packing up to leave. Harry and Ron confront him, learn his true identity, and then force him to go to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom with them. Once they arrive, Harry talks to Myrtle and learns how she died, and then locates a snake carved into one of the sink faucets. He then speaks some Parseltongue to it, and the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets opens. Lockhart dives in first, with the boys going in soon after him, and the 3 of them continue through the cave that is way beneath the castle. They soon see the skin of a great snake, and Lockhart faints, but only for a second as he quickly jumps back up and grabs Ron's wand out of his hand. Thankfully for the boys though, Lockhart grabbed the wrong wand, because right as he tries to perform a memory charm, it backfires on him, knocking him out. The explosion from the spell causes the ceiling to collapse, separating Ron and Harry continues onward toward the door to the chamber itself. And that's where we're cutting things off for this week. As always, let's get started with our analysis by taking a look at the first 3 categories of characters, timeline, and location. As for characters, things are pretty simple this week. Mainly we're missing the Weasleys. That includes Ginny, Percy, and the twins. In the book, they're either specifically mentioned or have speaking parts that aren't included in the movie. Other than them though, we see mostly everyone else who's mentioned in the book. Next, timeline is kind of ambiguous this week. We know in the book that Ginny was taken 3 days before exams, which were on June 1st. But in the movie, we aren't really given any specific date to know if things are lined up. But if you watched last week's episode, then you know that the second half of the movie is in one big rush, as we pretty much go from Christmas time to the end of the story very quickly. Ultimately though, this week pretty much gets a pass on account of it being too vague to tell. Lastly, before we get to our plot changes, we have location. This week we're missing 3 primary locations that are mentioned in the book. First, Gryffindor Tower, second, the Great Hall, and third, the Hogwarts staff room. Before we move forward, I just want to remind you that I can't go line by line correcting every word change made between the book and movie. That would take way too long. But if you're wanting to relive the story for yourself, I would highly encourage you check out the audiobooks on Audible. You can claim your free trial of Audible using my link in the description, which supports the channel and gets you 1 free audiobook of your choice. You can either claim the Chamber of Secrets, or if you want to get ahead for the next season of Movies vs. Manuscripts, you can grab The Prisoner of Azkaban. But now let's get back to the video and head into the plot changes. To start things off this week, we have a string of details which we don't fully get in the film. Again, the ending of the Chamber of Secrets movie is quite rushed, so there are multiple moments that got removed or just extremely condensed. So the first detail we have from the book that the movie glosses over is the fact that the boys couldn't get to Myrtle to question her. As you know from last week's episode, the boys came to the conclusion that Moaning Myrtle was the girl who died 50 years ago after they left the Forbidden Forest. Well, as the days passed, they found it hard to get any free time since the new Hogwarts rules kept them in groups with other students or under the constant supervision of a professor. Next, another detail we get is that they were still going to have exams. During Transfiguration class one day, Professor McGonagall told the students that exams were still on, to the outrage of all the second years who thought they had already suffered enough this school year. But McGonagall reminded them that they wouldn't have bothered keeping them in school if they didn't plan on teaching the students anything. Then she adds on to this that Dumbledore wished for them to continue with the exams, so that's what they're gonna do. This moment also gives us an exact timeline of where we're at in the school year, as we learn the exams would be happening on June 1st, which was exactly 1 week from the day that this announcement was made. Finally, the last small detail we get to start the chapter is that 3 days before exams, McGonagall announced to the school that the mandrakes were ready for cutting, which meant that the petrified victims would be able to be restored to their normal state that night. And as we're about to see, this is what triggers the final attack, as the heir of Slytherin had no more time to waste. After all, once the petrified students returned to life, they would be able to tell people what they saw. And on that note, we come to one of the biggest omissions from the film, which is Ginny trying to talk to Harry. After McGonagall's announcement, which was during breakfast in the Great Hall, Ron made a comment about how now it doesn't matter that they never got to talk to Myrtle, because Hermione will be awake soon and she'll have all the answers. He then adds that perhaps it would be better to let her stay petrified until exams are over, because if she wakes up with only 3 days to study, she might go crazy. Then at this moment, Ginny walked up and sat next to Harry, wringing her hands together and rocking back and forth. Ron tried to ask her what was up, but she wouldn't answer, and then Harry noticed that her mannerisms were awfully reminiscent of Dobby when he wasn't allowed to say something. Ginny told Harry that she needed to tell him something, but she wasn't able to get it out. So Harry leaned over and whispered to her, asking if it was something regarding the chamber, and Ginny quickly took a deep breath, but before she could reply, Percy walked up. He then kicked Ginny out of her seat, and Ron yelled at him, saying that Ginny was about to tell them something. Percy then got nervous and quickly said that it was nothing, and that Ginny saw him doing something, but he asked her not to tell anybody. And with that, Ginny left and Harry and Ron never heard what she had to say. It does make you wonder what could have happened if she would have been able to get it out, and how things would have gone differently if Harry and Ron knew what was really going on. But anyway, that brings us to our next change, which is another moment from the book that the movie chose not to include, as they condensed everything together for the end of the film. After all, the first scene we see here in the movie is Harry and Ron in the hospital wing visiting Hermione. But remember, the new Hogwarts rules state that students can't walk around without the supervision of a professor. And on top of that, in the book, Madame Pomfrey had forbid anyone to visit the hospital wing until the victims were revived. So how did Harry and Ron get to visit Hermione again during this dangerous time? Well, that's where this crucial omission comes into play. You see, although Harry figured that the villain would be caught once the petrified people were revived, he still didn't want to miss an opportunity to sneak off and talk to Moaning Myrtle. And after breakfast, Harry found the perfect time to get away from everyone else, as none other than Professor Lockhart escorted them to their next class. Lockhart, who was not happy about doing this servant's work, voiced his opinion about how Hagrid was most definitely the heir of Slytherin, and as soon as the victims woke up, they would say the same thing. Frankly, he thought it was ridiculous that he had to waste his time walking around with the students. Harry took advantage of this and agreed with Lockhart, to Ron's surprise, and said that he thinks he's right and that there isn't any danger anymore. Then, Harry told Lockhart that they're only one corridor away from class, so how about they just find their way from there and Lockhart can go back to his important work. Lockhart quickly agreed and ran off, leaving Harry and the rest of his class to walk on to the next hallway. But Harry and Ron slowed down and let their classmates walk ahead, and eventually they were able to slip off and head in a different direction. Unfortunately for them, they quickly ran into Professor McGonagall, who asked quite sternly why they were by themselves. But Harry was quick on his feet once again and informed her that they wanted to visit Hermione to tell her that she'd be revived soon and that everyone would be okay. This was the perfect response, because McGonagall immediately got choked up and almost teary-eyed at the boys because of their sweet sentiment and care for their friend. She then told them that they could go and to tell Madame Pomfrey that she gave them permission to visit Hermione. The boys then walked off, thankful that they got away with it this time, but also realizing that they now had to go to the hospital wing. So instead of going to Moaning Myrtle's like they originally planned, they ran off to visit Hermione. Madame Pomfrey reluctantly let them in, saying that there's no point in talking to someone who's been petrified, but this is finally where we come to what we see in the movie, with the boys finding the paper in Hermione's hand and realizing the truth about Slytherin's monster. Everything here is pretty similar to the movie, almost word for word, as the boys realize how each victim didn't die, how the monster was getting through the school, and what the monster even is. And although we mentioned it earlier, this is where we have a small change with the timeline of when the boys discover the truth about Myrtle. In the movie, it happens at this moment as they discuss this new revelation, but in the book, as I've already stated, they found this out after Aragog. There's also a crucial line during this conversation in the book, which the movie removed, and it's that Ron actually guesses that the entrance to the chamber is in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Once again, this is a moment of Ron showing some brains and putting the pieces together as well, not just being dragged along by Harry. In the movie, they find out that the bathroom is the entrance after they talk to Moaning Myrtle, which we'll get to here in a moment, but first, we have a couple more changes. The last change with this conversation regarding the basilisk is that the movie doesn't acknowledge its greatest weakness, which is that the crow of a rooster can kill it. This is a key detail in the book because Hagrid had made such a big deal earlier on in the year that his roosters were being killed. Remember, that's why he was heading to see Dumbledore the same day that Justin and Nick were attacked. Even in the movie, he has a dead rooster in his hand, but we never learn why. So now you know. And now that we've covered that conversation, we can look forward to what happens next in the movie. McGonagall's voice is heard overhead as she says that all students must go back to their dorms, and then Ron and Harry eavesdrop and learn about Ginny being taken. But that's not exactly what happens in the book. In fact, we're missing a critical step here, which is that the boys actually went to the Hogwarts staff room to wait for McGonagall. After they found out about the basilisk and had put together that Moaning Myrtle's bathroom had to be the entrance to the chamber, they wanted to tell McGonagall so that she could handle it from there. Crazy, right? Typically, we just see our trio taking matters into their own hands. Well, this time I guess they had a different idea. But don't worry, it won't be long before they're back to normal. Anyway, they go to the staff room and then wait there, but eventually they hear that same voice overhead that we hear in the movie, and the boys hide in a nearby wardrobe as the professors stream into the room. It is then from this position that they eavesdrop on the professor's conversation, which is pretty much the same as what we get in the movie, with the obvious change of location. The next change, though, is that the boys don't immediately run after Lockhart, who does get sent away just like in the movie. What actually happens is that the boys go back to Gryffindor Tower and sit there with the Weasley twins, not knowing what to do. For the first time, they felt pretty helpless. Eventually, Ron speaks up and says that Ginny must have known something about the chamber, and that's what she was trying to tell Harry that morning. After all, she's a pureblood, so what other reason could there be for her being attacked? Ron then says that they should go find Lockhart and tell him what they know, so that maybe he'll have more luck in his search. This goes to show just how desperate they are, as they're now placing their hope in the biggest buffoon of them all. But Harry, not knowing what else to do, agreed and they went out to find Lockhart. They eventually found him in his office, and just like in the movie, they confront him as he tries to leave. But now we come to the penultimate moment of our scenes this week, as we finally get to Lockhart's big reveal. The entire school year has been building to this moment as we've gotten hints about how ridiculous Lockhart is and how his stories are too good to be true. And now as Ron and Harry confront their professor in his office, they learn the secret of his fame. Honestly, this moment in the movie is pretty similar to the book. There are a couple line changes here or there, but nothing that would impact the narrative overall. There is, however, one major change from this moment, which is that Harry actually uses Expelliarmus on Lockhart. In the movie, they simply have Gilderoy pull out his wand and then back down as it's 2 against 1. But in the book, Harry blasts Lockhart backwards when he notices him going for his wand. Then, after Harry caught Lockhart's wand as it flew through the air, he tossed it out of the open window in the office. I don't know about you, but I would have loved to see that in the movie. Finally, we're to the last couple changes for this week, as the boys take Lockhart to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, find their way into the entrance to the chamber, and then get lucky as Lockhart blasts himself with a memory charm. You see, these scenes in the movie, once again, are quite accurate. In fact, I'm finding out that a lot of the scenes they chose to include are pretty spot on. The main issue with this movie is what they chose to remove. But anyway, back to the scene, there really aren't any major changes, but here are a couple small differences I noticed. First, we learn that Moaning Myrtle came back as a ghost to haunt Olive Hornby, the girl who made fun of her for her glasses. And it's a good thing she did too, or else they would have never found their way into the chamber. Second, in the book, Harry has to try a couple times before he can speak Parseltongue to the sink. At first, he just says it in English, and then the second time he actually tries to imagine the snake on the faucet is alive and moving. And that seems to do the trick as he finally gets some words out in Parseltongue. And on that note, that wraps up all of our changes for this week. Like I said, the part of the scene after they go down the pipe to get to the chamber is actually pretty similar with the final pages of this chapter in the book. They see a giant snake skin, Lockhart fakes passing out and then takes Ron's wand, and then the spell backfires and separates Ron and Harry from each other, causing Harry to press on alone. Once again, he conveniently is facing the antagonist at the end of the year by himself. But as for the changes we did have this week, what are your thoughts? Were these alterations for the film for the best, or do you think they should have stayed in line with the book's narrative? Let me know in the comments below. As always, check out the series playlist to catch up on any episodes you might have missed so far, and stay tuned every Sunday as I release new episodes of this series. Other than that, have a great week, and I'll see you in the next episode.